The president, known for his cult-like power over his base, suddenly engulfed by the very conspiracy theory he fueled. Today in the Oval Office, Trump trying to distance himself from Epstein, falsely blaming Democrats while insulting Republicans for getting, quote, duped.
It's all been a big hoax. It's perpetrated by the Democrats, and some stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans fall into the net.
Now, here's where it gets really wild. The Republicans who have stood by Trump through thick and thin have now publicly condemned him. They didn't do it quietly or behind closed doors. It was an outright call. They labeled his actions as immoral, appalling, vile, and reprehensible. Seems like Trump is starting to panic a little because for the first time during his second term, he's losing grip on his own party. This is a big concern for him because without the support of Republicans, the chances of impeachment go from being a long shot to almost a certainty. Chaos. Trump made some major blunders recently. One of his most outrageous comments was about seizing Greenland by military force.
We are going to do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not, because if we don't do it, Russia or China will take over Greenland, and we're not going to have Russia or China as a neighbor.
Yes, you heard that right. Greenland, the autonomous territory of Denmark, which just so happens to be our NATO ally. So it turns out that Trump is pretty fixated on Greenland, claiming he's ready to take it by force if Denmark doesn't sell it to him. That's raised a lot of eyebrows, especially among Republicans who are calling his actions immoral and appalling. Some are even suggesting that if he were to actually invade Greenland, it could lead to impeachment. That's not just coming from the Democrats. These are Republicans stating that this could spell the end of his presidency. And then there's that recent incident where he shared a racist video on truth socialing Barack and Michelle Obama as apes.
President Trump reposted on his verified Truth Social account has now been taken down. The video depicted the Obamas as apes. It appeared at the end of a 1-minute video that promotes false claims that the 2020 presidential election was rigged. The 2-second clip showed the Obamas' head edited onto the bodies of primates to the song, "The Lion Sleeps Tonight."
Yes, it's as outrageous as it sounds. The backlash was swift. The Kentucky GOP labeled it vile and reprehensible, and national Republican leaders demanded an apology, stressing that this was completely unacceptable. It seems that even the party that has stood by him through thick and thin is recognizing that some lines shouldn't be crossed, and this was definitely one of them. Now Trump's in a bit of a panic. He's always relied on unwavering Republican loyalty, believing his party would support him no matter what. But now more and more Republicans are condemning him and pulling away, openly stating they can't defend his actions.
The House has also voted to overturn President Trump's tariffs on Canada. 6 Republicans sided with nearly all Democrats on this one to approve the move. But even if it clears the Senate, the measure can be vetoed by the president. Speaker Mike Johnson called the vote disappointing and suggested it's pointless.
That's a huge shift. And Trump knows it could spell trouble for him. If Republicans start distancing themselves, then impeachment doesn't just become an abstract possibility, it becomes a very real threat. Turning back to the situation with Greenland, it's not just embarrassing, it's downright dangerous. Don Bacon, a Republican from Nebraska, took a firm stance, calling Trump's Greenland ambition both immoral and extremely embarrassing.
On tariffs alone, I disagree with the statement, but to threaten countries who oppose his strange talk on Greenland is also absurd. He says it almost every day, so I feel like people like me and others, we got to speak up and say it's wrong. You don't threaten a NATO ally.
He made a notable remark that if there were a military invasion of Greenland, he would lean toward voting for impeachment. That's a Republican congressman saying plainly that he would support impeachment if Trump went through with such an action, the kind of strong language you don't hear every day. And he's not the only one. Several Republicans have expressed their opposition to any military action in this case, saying that seizing Greenland by force would damage NATO and absolutely cross a red line. But Trump seems to be acting as if it's no big deal, thinking he can just threaten to invade a NATO ally without any serious repercussions. However, the message from Republicans is clear. They care deeply about these actions, and if he follows through, they're out. That's a precarious position for him to be in. So let's break this down. Trump's situation is getting pretty tense because his whole strategy relies on keeping the Republicans on his side.
You got to win the midterms, because if we don't win the midterms, it's just going to be, they'll find a reason to impeach me. I'll get impeached. We don't impeach them. You know why? Because they're meaner than we are. We should have impeached Joe Biden for 100 different things.
If they start to waver or say things that are just too much to defend, that support system starts to fall apart, and the Democrats are quick to jump on that opportunity. One particular incident that everyone's buzzing about is a racist video Trump shared in 2026 during his second term. It featured Barack and Michelle Obama depicted in a really offensive way, and the response from Republicans was pretty fierce. The Kentucky GOP quickly condemned it, calling the video vile and completely unacceptable. They promised some internal action, and national Republicans echoed that sentiment, demanding an apology and making it clear that this doesn't reflect their values.
There was an acknowledgement that this was definitely an error. I just don't believe a lower-level staffer actually did it.
Republican political strategist Malik Abdul.
Donald Trump has to have a serious reset, or he's going to risk not just what happens in the midterm. Donald Trump is going to risk his legacy if he does not change course.
What's striking here is that Republicans rarely turn on Trump like this. Usually they're quick to defend him, offering excuses and saying he's just joking or that the media is overreacting. But this time, there are no excuses, just outright condemnation. It's a pretty telling moment because even Trump's staunchest supporters are recognizing that he's crossed a line. And if they keep backing him, they risk getting dragged down with him. And it's not just this video that's ruffling feathers. Senator Lindsey Graham and Senator Rand Paul previously criticized Trump for some pretty outrageous comments he made on Truth Social about Democratic lawmakers urging troops to refuse illegal orders. Trump suggested they should be executed. Yes, executed. Even Graham and Paul, who usually stick up for him, called that one excessive and not a good idea. When Lindsey Graham is telling you to ease up, it really shows how far over the line you've gone. So now there's this unsettling pattern between threatening to invade Greenland, posting racist content, and casually calling for executions. Republicans are starting to come to terms with the fact that they can't keep defending this behavior. Some are even hinting that if he continues down this path, impeachment might have to be on the table. That's the panic setting in. Trump knows that if he loses the Republicans, it's game over for him. And the timing couldn't be worse, especially with Democrats already putting pressure on him for impeachment. With the Jack Smith report out there and the chaos with the Venezuela strike, things are really heating up for him. Trump's in a bit of a bind, and it's starting to show. His own party is starting to crack, which is a sign that things are shifting. Democrats are watching closely, and they might actually get some Republican votes for impeachment. It's not going to be a huge number, but even a few could swing things to a bipartisan effort. And you know what that means? If impeachment gains that kind of support, Trump is in serious trouble because it goes beyond mere party rivalry and becomes a real constitutional crisis. At a recent House GOP retreat, you could feel the tension. Trump himself aired his grievances about some Republicans who aren't towing the line. He warned that if they don't win the midterms, he could face impeachment. He's aware that the cracks are forming within his party's loyalty. And he knows if Democrats regain control of the House, with even a handful of Republicans aiding them, he could be in deep trouble. That's the panic right there. And it's why everything is heating up. So here's the situation. Trump is facing public condemnation from his own party for some pretty outrageous comments, like threatening to invade Greenland and posting some racist videos. Some Republicans have gone as far as saying that such actions could be grounds for impeachment, while others are demanding he apologize and face consequences. Trump is freaking out because his survival hinges on the loyalty of the Republicans, which seems to be slipping. As of now, there isn't a formal break between Trump and the Republicans, but you can definitely see the fractures. If they continue to widen, the idea of impeachment could transform from just a Democratic dream to a tangible reality, and that's truly Trump's worst nightmare. Now, let's dig into what's really going on. It might sound like Republicans are completely abandoning Trump, but it's more nuanced than that. They're not completely breaking away. Instead, they're drawing some clear lines. They're saying they'll rally behind him on most things, but definitely not on everything. And those exceptions include threatening to invade NATO allies and those racist videos. That's where they've drawn a line in the sand. And Trump has crossed it not just once, but twice. Let's take a closer look at what these condemnations really mean. Starting with the Greenland situation, Trump has been fixated on buying Greenland for years now. In his first term, it was more of a joke, a classic Trump moment. But this time, he's dead serious. He's constantly bringing it up, putting pressure on Denmark, and even suggesting the use of military force if they refuse to sell. That's where the Republicans have decided enough is enough. Congressman Don Bacon from Nebraska was pretty blunt in an interview with Newsweek, labeling Trump's Greenland ambitions as immoral and downright embarrassing. So here's the deal. There's been some serious pushback from Republicans about Trump's talk of invading Greenland. Bacon, a moderate Republican who usually supports Trump, said that if the former president actually goes through with such a move, he might lean toward impeachment. Now, he's not outright saying he would definitely vote for it, but the fact that he's even considering it is a big deal because it shows that Trump might be losing support from within his own party. And he's not alone in this sentiment. Multiple Republicans have expressed concerns that using force on Greenland could really shake up NATO, with many saying they wouldn't back any military action. Time magazine covered this, and Politico confirmed it too. Republicans are making it crystal clear invading Greenland is crossing a line. If Trump does that, they're done. This poses a real problem for Trump since his whole game plan hinges on Republican loyalty. If they start breaking ranks and calling out actions as indefensible, he loses his protective barrier, and that's when Democrats can swoop in. Now, why Greenland, you might wonder? Well, it's all about Denmark being a NATO ally. There's this Article 5 in the NATO treaty that states if one member is attacked, it counts as an attack on all members. So if Trump were to invade Greenland, given that it belongs to Denmark, it would be like attacking a NATO ally, triggering that very article. Just imagine the chaos. It would splinter NATO and completely undo 75 years of Western unity, not to mention isolating the U.S. on the global stage. Republicans are well aware of these stakes, which is why they're opposed to this idea. Because even if Trump sees Greenland as strategically important, it just isn't worth dismantling NATO over. But Trump seems unbothered, continuing to pressure Denmark and acting like Republicans will support him, as they always have. This time, though, they're publicly saying no. They're not backing him. And if he goes through with this, he'll be on his own. That has to be alarming for Trump, since it's a real wake-up call that there are limits to Republican loyalty. And let's not forget the even more unsettling thing. Trump posted a video on Truth Social that showed Barack and Michelle Obama as apes. He didn't even create it. He just shared it from some random internet troll. So there was this pretty shocking post from Trump showing the Obamas as apes, and the backlash hit fast. The Kentucky GOP came out swinging, calling the post vile and unacceptable, while promising that they'd deal with anyone involved in creating or spreading such content. They didn't hold back. They actually demanded an apology from Trump. Meanwhile, Republicans across the nation echoed those sentiments. Various news outlets, including CNN, the Courier Journal, and Al Jazeera, reported on how Republicans were quick to distance themselves from Trump this time, which is unusual since they typically defend him or make excuses. This time, it was all about condemnation without any justifications. What really makes this significant is the nature of the post itself. Depicting black people as apes is one of the most egregiously racist tropes out there. It's blatant, not some hidden message, and Trump put it out there publicly while he was president. Republicans seem to be realizing that they can't support something like this. If they do, they're essentially endorsing racism, and that's political suicide in their eyes. So, with all this pressure, they're asking for an apology and making it clear that Trump has crossed a serious line. But here's the kicker. Trump hasn't apologized or taken the post down. He seems to be just brushing it off like it's no big deal. That's got to be frustrating for Republicans who really took a chance by condemning him. They risked backlash from his supporters, and yet he's just ignoring their plea for acknowledgement or an apology. It leaves them in a tight spot. Calling out Trump without him budging creates a bigger problem. If he won't even apologize for something that's so straightforwardly wrong, what does that imply about how much influence they actually have over him? They're starting to see that maybe their sway isn't as strong as they believed. Then there's the broader context here. This isn't the first time Republicans have pushed back against Trump. For example, Senator Lindsey Graham and Senator Rand Paul previously criticized him for a post where he suggested that Democratic lawmakers who told troops to refuse illegal orders deserve to be punished by death. It was a serious accusation, essentially calling for the execution of those lawmakers. Even Graham and Paul, who are usually in Trump's corner, thought that was crossing a line, with Graham even saying it wasn't a good idea at all. You really have to shake your head when even Lindsey Graham tells Trump to tone it down. It's like that's the moment, things have gone off the rails. The situation is pretty wild right now, with Trump making threats that seem more like movie plots than reality. From talking about executions to sharing racist videos and even threatening our NATO allies. Meanwhile, Republicans are starting to draw some pretty clear lines in the sand. They're saying, we'll back you on policy, we'll stand with you on investigations and impeachment, but when it comes to death threats and racism, that's a hard no. And here's the kicker. Behind the scenes, Republicans are genuinely scared of Trump supporters. They realize that if they break away from Trump in public, they might face challenges in their primaries, get death threats, or even lose their seats altogether. So they're stuck trying to play both sides, publicly shunning Trump's worst antics to distance themselves a bit, but still not actually doing much about it. They want to condemn him just enough to avoid being labeled as complicit without inflaming Trump's base, which, let's face it, doesn't do nuance all that well. They want absolute loyalty, and anything less feels like betrayal to them. Take Bacon, for instance. He might lean towards supporting impeachment if Trump were to invade Greenland, but for Trump's base, that's seen as a total sellout. And when the Kentucky GOP outright condemns one of Trump's racist posts, they see it as a sign of weakness. It's like Republicans are caught in this tug-of-war, trying to hold on to their principles while not losing the support of Trump's loyal fans. And let's be honest, it's not really working. At a recent House GOP retreat, Trump had a little venting session about some members who aren't towing the line. He warned House Republicans that they absolutely need to win the midterms, or he could face impeachment, making it clear he knows the loyalty from his party is starting to waver. He's trying to scare them into submission, saying if they don't stick with him, the Democrats could take over and he'd be the one getting impeached, with them getting all the blame. It's a threat that's effective for some Republicans, but not all. A few are beginning to think that maybe impeachment wouldn't be the worst outcome after all, especially if it means stepping away from defending increasingly outrageous behavior. So the calculations being made are fascinating. If Trump continues escalating his antics, whether it's invading Greenland or sharing more racist content, it's going to be interesting to see just how far Republicans will go to keep towing that line. Trump is starting to lose grip on his party. And while it's not a total meltdown just yet, we're definitely seeing some cracks. Some Republicans are realizing that if they stick too close to him, it could cost them. They might lose moderate voters, swing districts, and even the suburbs, which is enough to make them rethink their loyalty. They're beginning to consider that maybe they shouldn't defend everything he does. This shift has caught the attention of Democrats, and they're pretty excited about it. If they can manage to get even a few Republicans on board for impeachment, it could shift from being just a party issue to a bipartisan one. When both parties agree that a president has crossed a line, it carries a lot more weight. It changes the conversation and public perception, making even the thought of removal in the Senate a possibility, however slim. Groups like Free Speech for People and the Citizens Impeachment Removal Coalition are already hard at work. They're lobbying, planning protests, and targeting Republicans directly by showing up at their town halls and laying down the questions. They're asking if Republicans will condemn Trump's behavior or if they would support impeachment if he steps over the line. Some Republicans are starting to say yes, and that sends a clear message to voters about where those lines are drawn. This whole situation is also tying into discussions around the 25th Amendment, which allows the cabinet to remove a president if he can't fulfill his duties. While it's intended for medical emergencies, there's a debate about whether Trump's actions, like posting racist videos or making threats, show he's unfit for office. That behavior isn't typical for a president, and if Republicans start agreeing that his actions are beyond the pale, they might consider invoking the 25th. It's a long shot, but the very fact that people are talking about it is telling. The bottom line is that Trump's losing control over his party, and as some Republicans start to speak out against him, it's becoming clearer that things are beginning to change. So here's the deal. Things have gotten a bit tense in the Republican camp, and it's got Trump pretty rattled. His whole game plan relies on staying in the good graces of the Republican Party. Without their support, he's left hanging by a thread, maybe even one bad move away from impeachment, and he knows it. Let's break this down. First up, Trump made a serious misstep by suggesting he might use military force to invade Greenland, which is actually an autonomous territory of Denmark, a NATO ally. If he went through with that, it would mean the U.S. is attacking a NATO member, triggering Article 5 of the NATO treaty. That says if one member is attacked, all members have to come to their defense. So, if Trump invaded Greenland, he'd be putting the entire NATO alliance in jeopardy and isolating America on the world stage. That's a big deal, and Republicans are well aware of it. Representative Don Bacon even said that an invasion would push him towards supporting impeachment, essentially saying it would be a red line for him. Now, on to the second point. Trump shared a racist video depicting Barack and Michelle Obama as apes, which is the epitome of vile racist stereotypes. This wasn't just some random social media post. He did it while serving as president. The Kentucky GOP came out strongly against it, labeling the video as despicable and demanding an apology, promising some kind of internal repercussions. That's noteworthy because Republicans usually stick up for Trump, but this time they condemned it outright. They realized that to defend this kind of behavior would mean endorsing racism, which is political suicide for them. And we can't ignore that this behavior isn't new. Trump has a history of making outrageous remarks. He once accused Democratic lawmakers who suggested that troops should refuse illegal orders of sedition, even hinting at executions. That's a pretty extreme stance. And even Lindsey Graham and Rand Paul, two of his staunchest supporters, were taken aback by that one. So you've got Trump making threats of executions, sharing racist content, and now playing with the idea of invading NATO allies. It's no wonder Republicans are stepping up, laying down the law and saying they can only support him up to a certain point. Trump's really feeling the heat. You know, at a recent GOP retreat, he vented about some party members not sticking with him, warning them they need to win the upcoming midterms or face the consequences of impeachment.